Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Imagine being so pathetic that the place you were born and the language you speak is the only thing you can afford to be proud about. The man in our first story really got on the nerves of our OP's husband and ended up getting what he deserved. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Don't like my husband? Good luck finding your theater. So this was about 1 or 2 years ago when both me and my hubby were working in our local movie theater. Now for this story, I need to explain something. My husband's an immigrant. English is not his first language, but he's learned it from a very young age, so he speaks it fluently. He just has an accent. He's very self-conscious about this and makes an effort to overpronounce words when he's working to make sure he's understood. On this day, he was working in the box office selling tickets, and I was just inside the entrance of the building to rip tickets and tell people where their theater was located. It was also our theater's discounted ticket day. On these days, we have to ask every guest if they're members of our reward program so they can get cheapo tickets. If not, we encourage our paid membership, then if they refuse, our free one. So he did just that. But this man, let's call him RA for racist a-hole, just couldn't understand any of this. For this part of the story, I'm repeating what my hubby told me. My husband tried his usual spiel to RA. RA said no, he didn't want the paid membership and didn't want the free version either. He just wanted his discounted ticket. My husband tried to explain he needed to sign up for one of the memberships, and RA screams how he shouldn't have to pay money for discounted tickets. My husband again reminds him of the free version, and RA snaps, asking why he didn't say that earlier. He did. So he signs up and gets his ticket and comes in to me. I greet him and he angrily says how terrible that dirty immigrant in the box office was and how my husband had tried to scam him. He also made comments about how we need to hire Americans who can actually speak English. Hearing him spout this BS about my husband made my blood boil, but I decided that this D-bag wasn't worth getting fired over. I take his ticket and say in my customer service voice, "Theater 21 on the right." He leaves. His theater was on the left, and we didn't even have a Theater 21. I'm sure he wandered around for a good while, but luckily he never complained. After my shift, I told my hubby about some RA complaining about him and told him what I did to him. My husband thought it was great after a long day of dealing with annoying customers, RA included. And our second story. Ex-boss didn't want to pay my wages. We paid ourselves. This happened about a decade ago. I was always doing seasonal work, so I'd be flitting from one firm to another, but it went boobs up when 2 of the 3 firms I did this for closed and the remaining one was quiet due to bad weather. But luckily, after a month of no work, I saw an ad for a local fruit and veg delivery required and applied. After meeting the owner and him already knowing me, I didn't know him, odd story, I got the job, was told to be there early next day where I'd meet Doris, his nickname from a customer, a retired pain in the butt. Brought my driver's license as requested, although he didn't ask for it, and I mentioned it a few times over the next few weeks, but we rarely saw each other. Doris kept going on about the previous staff member and how he was gay and doing the occasional slurs, talking behind boss's back about his stutter and generally being a real bee. Also, he'd take things out of orders I'd prepared to fill his orders, then complain that part of my orders were missing, so I started having a slight go at him. Doris would smoke in the van and blow it towards me. He'd drink his tea in the van whilst moving, and I'd accidentally tap the brake a bit too hard or accelerate, meaning Doris would spill some on himself, but he continued with the insults to previous staff and boss. One day, Doris described the lad he kept saying was gay and where he lived, when the penny dropped. The lad he was on about was someone I knew, was in a year below me at school, and wasn't gay. He had a girlfriend and 1 kid, and in a small market town, saying that would have been wildfire. And was a really nice person, definitely didn't warrant this abuse. So I let him know when I ran into him one time. Turns out Doris hadn't been doing this behind his back, he'd been at it when the lad still worked there. So now I know why he'd walked out of the job. 2 to 3 months into the job, my seasonal work boss called asking me to return. Couldn't turn it down, more hours and more pay. I talked with current boss and he was fine with my plan. Instead of coming in at 6 o'clock to pick orders and myself and Doris deliver them, I go in early, used to go in at 2 or 3, pick orders, load van, and when done, it'd be all set for Doris to deliver. To be honest, no idea why he paid 2 of us. It was a one-man job easily. Well, Doris didn't like this. He'd complain about it every day when he came in at 6:30ish, then complain when he was driving off and I was setting off to second job, saying things like, "Don't know why you bother coming in, you only leave early," and "Oh, going are you? F off then," etc. Couple months go by and seasonal job ends, so back to normal at fruit and veg job. Loaded orders, got van ready, and got on with it. But on Tuesday, Doris never did Mondays, no idea why, I got into the van, Doris walked up to the van and said, "The F are you doing?" Me, "What do you think? We're all packed to go." "You want to drive? Just say so." Doris sulked and walked away, not saying a word, so I got on with the deliveries. Got to second customers when boss phoned asking why I was driving, told him Doris had just walked away, so he'd left me alone to do it. Boss said he'd see me tomorrow and see what's what, and I thought nothing of it. Day after, was sorting orders, boss drives up and puts more stock in fridge unit, and half an hour later, when I've loaded van, boss waved me over. All of a sudden, he said because I'd never shown him my driving license, despite several attempts to show him it, he'd have to lay me off, there and then. Doris was stood in the main room grinning. Boss said I'd get my pay the day after, meaning I had to turn up in early hours to get it. Sure enough, next day I turn up, boss hasn't made an appearance, phone him, and he doesn't answer, and this goes on for 2 weeks. So I go to the place and leave a note on the desk, I still had keys to the place, saying he owed me a week's wage. Roughly 2 weeks later, still no word and no pay. One night, stood in pub chatting with a mate, also worked one of the seasonal sites I did, when we were talking about this when he says, "He owes you wages still? You still have the keys?" Me, "Yes." Mate grins. "Oh. Light bulb." Didn't like doing it, but if I wasn't going to get paid, I'd pay myself. So mate and I went to the warehouse. I came away with 3 bags of veg, him with 5. Sure, it wouldn't have come remotely close to what I was owed, but better than nothing, which I'd resigned myself to getting. Back at the pub, I gave most of mine to pub owners, handy as they made meals for me when I was working all hours, and mate split some of his with mates and fed his family for quite some time. Surprise, surprise. I got a call a couple of days later to come pick up my wages. Got there and he handed me the wage packet, which felt thicker than normal. Turns out he decided to pay me an extra week's pay for short notice firing. His bad math showed again, as there was quite a bit more than 2 weeks' pay. I explained that I didn't have the keys on me because I was en route to job interview, but said I'd stick them under the door ASAP. Few days pass, let him sweat, and I nip round to drop the keys off with a bonus letter I left on the desk, telling him about Doris taking the P out of his stutter, out of his bad maths, boss was bad with numbers, his wife had to do that side of things when she could, and also about the racist and homophobic contents, and that Doris would also nick veg from storage every day. Don't think he'd believe me, but WTH. Few weeks go by and I run into him as I'm nipping to the shops. He didn't mention the letter nor Doris, but I'd already heard that Doris wasn't working there anymore and asked if I was still needing driving job. Turned it down and said I was busy and had to be off. Guess he'd had enough because shortly afterwards I'd seen a different firm doing deliveries to the same shops we used to do and found out he'd closed up. No idea if he sold up or just shut the warehouse. Shop was still open for a short while after. Didn't care, to be honest. And our last story. But I'm the victim. So I was heading home from a vacation in North Carolina, and long story short, this Karen's speeding at an intersection and ends up hitting my car, which completely flips it over. I end up having to be pulled from the sunroof of my car. Thank God I have one. Because with a broken leg, I couldn't really get out myself. Karen's freakout starts when I'm literally getting glass pulled out of my arm. Karen dramatically throws herself from her car and starts screaming in pain and cursing at me while holding her leg and rolling around. But as soon as a paramedic notices her, she magically stops wailing. After a brief examination, the paramedic simply tells her, "You're fine." Karen immediately starts to argue, but after she realizes her defeat, she storms over to me in a huff. Mind you, I'm still getting glass out of my arm. The conversation went kinda like this. Karen, "You hit my car and ruined my kid's day." Her kids weren't even in the car with her. "What do you have to say for yourself?" Me, I did." Karen. Yes, and you ruined it too. The only damage I did to her car was a dent across the front of the car. Meanwhile, mine was totaled. Paramedic. Ma'am, could you please leave her alone? The officers will talk to you in a bit, and you can tell them there. Me. And you've already proven to be delusional from your little broken leg stunt. Karen. Delusional? You're the one faking it. I'm the victim here. Karen then decides it's a good idea to pull me out of the chair and get me to stand on my broken leg with no warning whatsoever. Of course, as soon as she lets go of my wrist, I stumble back, fall on my chair, and hit my head on the pavement. I'm really what happened next, since I was dazed from bashing my head on the pavement, but because of all the yelling, "But my kids," and "I'm suing all of you," I'm pretty sure she was arrested on the count of assault. I was brought to the hospital. I ended up spending 2 extra days in North Carolina because I couldn't drive due to my broken leg and concussion and had to be picked up by a friend/coworker. I'm currently working with my lawyer on pressing charges. This idiot knew she was ruined the moment she hit you. She thought she'd give it a good go anyways. I hope you destroy her dumb butt. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.